Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. And in this video I'm going to review All Visible Objects by Moby. Moby is an artist that has started his career from the early 90s and up until this point, in about 3 decades that he does music, he has gone into lots of different genres into the whole sphere of electronic music, from ambient, from breakbeat music to pop, and even some more rock and punk fusions in his sound. The importance of Moby as an artist for me is significant, as for me at least, Play is one of the greatest albums of all time. For such a long album, having so many different tracks, and for each one of them conveying so many different emotions throughout the length of this whole album, it makes for a one of a kind experience that, in my opinion, even Moby himself hasn't managed with any of his past or his future works to surpass or even get close to them in any way. Moby's decline as an artist over the years is something a bit apparent. He hasn't made a big single for the past couple of years. The really strong breakthrough single that I can remember was with the track Are You Lost in the World Like Me, which had also a very powerful video clip, but the album itself, These Systems Are Falling, was not one of the albums that got the best ratings from both critics and the public. And pretty much after this point, Moby has done numerous works, but I don't see people talk about Moby anymore. Instead, when I see people talk about Moby, is more of like clowning him just because of how much he tries to force his ideas and his opinions through social media. But that's not a case or a topic that I think needs to be discussed right now. But musically, still, some of his later works have pretty much to use a similar formula, or they might be forced. But for me, I think I'm one of the few people right now that still enjoys his later works, and I'm still looking forward to what Moby does. And so I got into All Visible Objects having expectations, because why not? It's a Moby work. I enjoy the albums of Moby. And getting into this brand new album, this came as a very pleasant surprise for me, because this album is a return to form, a sound that Moby would do like back in the 90s. Moby had such a long time to make an album like this, and just with the beginning of the first track, Morningside, I was just so pleased that I was like, this is the one, this is the album I was anticipating for Moby for all of those years. Even if I was still enjoying the works he would do up until now, this is the 90s Moby that I remember, with its infectious beats, the very nice segments, those vocal samples, the energy, the dance portions, the melancholic synths, all of the elements that I would love from Moby's music were there. I think I haven't heard such a fully fleshed out work and such an upbeat and such an emotional experience since the release of Play, which was like 21 years ago. This album though still contains lots of elements that give you a formula of what is the usual sound of Moby. It's not like he's trying something brand new or he's making something that he hasn't done before in the past, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because for me, Moby is one of those artists that has a very significant sound that few other artists manage to comprehend the way he does. I always laughed with Moby how under so simplistic melodies he manages to create such captivating emotional results. How his synths and the melodies he thinks end up being so powerful and emotional, and also just adding this with some beat portions and some catchy dance elements. This is something that I don't usually see artists manage to do in the way Moby does. Now though, before getting to everything I love about this album, let's start with the main concerns I had listening to this album for the first time, because I was definitely a bit more indifferent with my first listen. And that's due to some main factors and main issues I've stumbled upon through the listening process of All Visible Objects. First of all, the sounds on this album, you can definitely say that they're outdated. Those are sounds that Moby has been developing and making for lots of years, and they sound pretty much the same. It's not like Moby just offers something really that new. Second of all, the mixing on this album can be a little bit all over the place, especially when it comes with some of the vocal samples. They might become very loud through the mix at some points, or there are some occasions where the synths might overblow anything else. The mix can be definitely weird and concerning at points. And even when it comes to the vocals, there are so many moments with tracks like My Only Love and One Last Time, or with Forever, where I was at least a bit indifferent when it comes to the vocoded vocals. Then there is also a pacing issue. There are so many tracks where it feels like it constantly builds up and builds up and builds up. And when it comes like the drop portion where you get the beat, it's such a small portion towards the songs. There could have been more to the structure and the pacing, in my opinion, just giving a bit more to them. A major example of this is the track Forever. The track is 5 minutes long, and this track constantly builds up and builds up and builds up, and it takes about 4 minutes of the song until we get to the drop. And when the drop comes and the beat starts playing, it lasts for about half a minute, and that's about it. And it's a bit of a shame, because Forever, in my opinion, has some of the best ideas and some of the most infectious and beautiful scenes throughout this entire project. So I would love if this track would be paced and structured in a different way in order to become even more compelling. So there were definitely major issues with this album when I first heard it, but I would still see myself constantly coming back to most of the songs over and over and over again. And it was at this point where I saw all of the issues I previously had with the tracks just started fading away. And that's the great thing with Moby's music, is that it's always the ideas he presents. They're just so infectious, they're just so addictive, they're just so passionate, so beautiful. Even if there were some portions that didn't sit that well with me at first, I would still come back to those songs and I would enjoy them more and more and more, because after a while I was at this point where I would say that what if the pacing or the structure was different? What if the mixing was different? What if the vocals were processed in a different fashion? What if Moby wouldn't use those quite outdated sounds? I wouldn't think it would change the result all that much, because the track still managed to get stuck in my head and think that most of the ideas Moby presents on this album are some of the best ideas he has presented in an album in a very, very long time. And I would come back to so many of those songs. And it's not because it's like a delusion of like forcing myself to like those songs. It's because I legitimately enjoy the ideas that are presented in pretty much the majority of this album. And at the end of the day, I think that All Visible Objects is one of the greatest albums from Moby, and that it's generally an amazing album for electronic music. And it's unfortunate that this album is probably going to be unnoticed, as it's with all the later works from Moby. And I think it's a shame, because we're talking, in my opinion, about the greatest album Moby has done in like 20 years. Throughout this whole album there are still two moments that I can't get through. Those are the tracks Too Much Change, which goes for almost 10 minutes. It is a sort of a piano ballad. There are some nice portions here and there, but I think it's a kind of okay song. The one track though I really can't get into is the track Separation. I think it's one of those very weak moments when it comes to Moby's music, where we have just a very weird piano track that, in my opinion, it's not compelling compared to anything else the album has to offer. It feels sort of like a filler. It could have been better if this track was not in the album, in my opinion. Now, if there is one track that stands out of this album the most, it is definitely the most aggressive, the most energetic, the most unique moment in this album, and this is obviously the main single of this album, Power is Taken. This is where we get the rebellious side of Moby, a sound that has a great throwback in the 90s, and my god, the synths he uses in this thing, they're so infectious, they're so amazing. There are those sort of industrial EBM acid scenes that are so amazing. The lyrical content of this song, yes, it's quite simplistic, it's quite generic stuff, but this is usual for the past couple of Moby works. But still, the track by itself, it's just so epic. The noise, the power on this thing, the multiple alarm sounds, it is such a heavy and such a powerful and energetic songs. I just can't stress how much I love this. I think this is one of the greater songs Moby has written in a very, very long time. Getting through the rest of the album, we talk about some of the more emotional and a bit more calm moments. Getting to tracks like Morningside, I instantly felt in love with the way this song was constantly progressing and getting even more powerful. My Only Love is one of the more emotional moments in this album, and it makes for an amazing moment in my opinion. Refuge is one of the greater moments when it comes to a more different approach. It is one of the more energetic cuts. It is a bit dark and sinister, and I really love that. The sampling choice can be a bit more haunting, and in general it gives me a feel like I'm listening to a Stereo Nova song in some respects, which is an amazing thing. One last time, the beat and the bass to it, and even the piano melody, it sounds so much like one of the dub remixes in the album Suzuki in Dub by Tosca, and I just can't get this out of my head. Now, when it comes to the vocals, this track is not one of my favorites. It has some weird portions when it comes to the female vocal sampling and the vocoded vocals from Moby, but in general it is a quite nice laid back song. Rise Up in Love had so many moments that I didn't really enjoy that much at the beginning. For example, it has a weird sort of like reggae portion to it towards the middle of the song. Some of the vocal sampling, it's a bit weird in the mix, and even with the beat or the synths, they might feel a bit cheesy, but honestly I just love this song so much. It ended up being one of my favorite moments. It's really addictive, and it is a very powerful and emotional moment with a very weird twist of sounds to it. Forever, in my opinion, has one of the greatest beats, and that's why I would definitely love for this beat to be more of a part in this song. But in general, I like how the vocoded vocals are combined with those gorgeous synths. Tecie is definitely one of my favorite and the most emotional moments out of this album, and it's the track I love the most when it comes to the pacing, because the beat never stops and it has a constant progression, and as the song progresses and goes on and on, it gets even more epic, even more powerful, even more dynamic, something that in general I loved with the works of Moby, and I think that this song is a great example of this formula that I loved from Moby for all of those years. All Visible Objects is one of the completely instrumental moments on this album, and as far I was indifferent towards this track at first, I like how laid back it is with the piano melodies to it, the synths, the minimal beat, and it makes for a very nice finisher. And one of the things I would say I love about this album is that even if the tracks are so lengthy, they go for like 9 or 5 or 7 minutes long, and they don't feel like they're that long. They just pass so smoothly, you don't even realize it, and this is the genius behind this work from Moby, is that in such simplistic and repetitive ideas, the tracks feel shorter than they actually are. So I don't want to stretch this even further. This album is a massive grower on me. I think it's one of the greatest works from Moby in his entire catalog. And that's all I have to say. Sure, getting into this album, you would find lots of flawed moments or that there was some missing potential, but I still encourage you to give this album a chance, especially if you're a fan of some of the more dancey and some of the more old school moments from Moby, because I think this album serves as a very, very solid throwback. I personally am addicted to the majority of this album, and listening to this further and further, it made the most rewarding experience when it comes to music for me in 2020 so far. I'm going to give All Visible Objects a 9 minus out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.